1, 2, check, check. Testing. 1, 2, check, check, check. Check 1, check 2. Testing, testing the mic. Check, check. Testing. 1, 2, check, check. Testing, testing. Are you hearing the lapel from? Okay, cool.
kids perform the national anthem, we can then bring the projector down.
Okay.
Okay?
Check. Check.
You can go down after the national anthem.
Two, check 1, 2, 2, 2, 2. Check 1, 2. Come on, let's go. Check 1, 2, 2, 2, 2, 2. Check 1. 2, 2. Keep.
receiver is getting it, but
it's everybody else being like, oh, can we get this then? Can we add this? Can we add this? Yeah. Just like, dude, I don't even figure this stuff out.
1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 3 4 1 2 1 2 check check 1 2 check check. Matt, who do I give it to?
Yeah. Testing, 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 testing.
Towards the center so we can fit, maximize our space in here today. Wire going to be on this side? Wire's going to be on this side? This way because they're warming up right there. Okay. Because I think the podium's over here.
They can come in up the stairs and come in behind it.
Okay, once that is done, I'll come out. And they come up, I'll just move to the side. That'll be fine. Okay. That'll be fine. Again, come on in, take a seat. Please move your way towards the center. The choir will come up. Will this have it on, but I'm going to introduce the dance program. I can be down there.
Yes, you can.
But I don't want to.
What's that?
Again, come on in, take a seat. We have plenty of spots up here in the front. Again, please move towards the center so we can make more room for our colleagues as they enter into the auditorium. Morning. So I'm going to introduce you guys. I have that.
Yeah. Say that it was choreographed by a professor from UC Riverside. Actually, it's a professor from University of Wisconsin. He's a grad student from UC Riverside. He got that position at University of Wisconsin right after he was to test.
I see on the ticket. I'm the director and the editor of the in-depth production. And they're doing this piece.
Cumbia.
They're doing a Cumbia.
It's a piece called Cumbia.
They're doing a piece of Cumbia.
It is about for the professor and the fight for the American dream
Cumbia is saying the same thing. And what they want to do is Cumbia that it's a piece about awesome war and culture and you see, I'll explain to you.
It's right. It was from UC Riverside.
UC Riverside professor.
He's actually a graduate student. Who's now a full professor at University of Wisconsin.
Written by a graduate student at UC Riverside who's now a full-time professor at University of Wisconsin.
I know that's a lot. I should have
I'll
written
get.
it down.
No,
but
I'll get. I'll get.
I gotta go test music right
You're
now.
good. You're good. You're good. Yeah.
You guys are on about five minutes. You guys are awesome.
I am. Yeah. Yes. That would be nice. Come on in, go ahead and take your seats. We're going to start in about 5 minutes with a great performance.
gave me some instructions, right? I know how to. It's about integration and the types of integration. Yeah, so it's not good. Right here. Listen on. Yeah, yes, that'd be better. Yes. After the next, after the dance, we're gonna move it out. How you guys doing? About 3 minutes. You ready? All right. Is Miss Elder down there or is she back here? She's back there. Okay. Okay, let's get ready to take our seats. We're going to start in about 2 minutes. Jackie, is it clear out there? The choir is going to be coming in through the side right here, but we still, once the choir is done, we're going to move the podium on the stage, okay? And then once I enter, I'm going to just bring it downstairs, okay? Okay. I have Joanne, Evelyn, Al, Emery, Brian, Anna Kinsey, Gail Tires. Yeah. Got it. Okay, let's go ahead and take our seats. We're going to get this party started. To begin our session this morning, I am proud and honored to introduce, under the direction of Meg Elder, dance teacher here at Anaheim High School, the Anaheim Dance Production. They are doing a piece called Cambio. It is about immigration and the search and the fight for the American dream. I am proud to introduce the Anaheim Dance Production. Great job. Aren't they great? Always blown away with the talent Meg Elder produces. Great job, Anaheim Dance Production. On a side note, that piece was written by a graduate student at UC Riverside who is now hired as a professor full-time at University of Wisconsin. So congratulations and great job. I'm now going to go ahead and bring out a senior at Anaheim High School, Crystal Alvarez, who's going to lead us in our salute to the flag, the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated.
Actually, she actually mentioned you to remain standing. We're going to do the national anthem now. Psych! All right. So now I'm pleased to announce, under the direction of Jeffrey Duras, the Anaheim High School Choir, who will lead us in the national anthem. You may be seated. Great job. Great job. You guys were great. Weren't they great? All right, now they're going to get the stage set up for our keynote. Well, good morning, AUHSD. It is great. Well, I can't really see anyone because the lights are in my face, but it's great to see everyone. I know that you're out there. All right. Thank you, sir. Well, before we begin, I want to say a few quick introductions, some special guests that are in the room with us this morning. First, we have our board president, Al Jabbar. We also have trustees Anna Piercy, Mr. Brian O'Neill, and Miss Anne-Marie Randall-Trejo. We're also pleased that we have some members of our Anaheim Collaborative here from Cal State Fullerton. We have Evelyn Soki, President of Cypress College, Dr. Joanna Schillings, and from ROP, Gail Kairos and Jennifer Prado. And then also, given the topic of what we're going to be discussing throughout the morning, we also have Brian Ton here. He has been leading the mindfulness training with over 80 of our teachers throughout the district so far. So, good morning. You know, I also want to give a shout out. I don't know if you know this, but we're live streaming right now to the remaining colleagues from throughout our district. At Hope School right now, we have all of the Hope School staff and all the moderate severe teachers and their instructional assistants at Hope School, seeing this over 300 people there. We also have 300 instructional aides and our program specialists and psychologists being trained at the ROP office. They're observing or watching this keynote as well. And then our counselors, campus safety aides, and our family and community engagement specialists are back at the district campus also with us through the satellite live stream. I am really excited for what the day will bring. We've been working on this since last spring. It's amazing. It's finally here. It's also hard to believe that we're now beginning the second quarter of the school year. I'm going to take a moment to introduce Grant Schuster. I'm going to bring Grant up here. He's going to say a few words of welcome to everyone as well. So Grant, come on up.
All right, well, thank you for the introduction, Jaron. I'm not sure how much of the clapping was for me and how much is for the taco guys I bring out on my visits. I've been to 13 of the sites now. I have visited hundreds of classrooms, and it has been my distinct pleasure to see so many of you at work in what you do, and I'm very proud to represent you. From site to site, it is clearly evident that discipline has become a major obstacle in classroom instruction that we all want to afford our students. Realizing the growing need over the last few years, ASTA and the district created the Student Discipline Work Group with teacher, district and site admin, as well as board members Jabbar and Piercy. We're collaborating to find services that can address the needs of students whose needs often can't be addressed within the classroom. During the last 3 years, I've also watched teachers all over the district show students how much they care and how dedicated they are to every student succeeding, no matter their need or struggle. These efforts have helped build thousands of student-teacher bonds that have helped many of our students get through difficult times at school and in their personal lives. Now we must also address our students who have deeper needs. I want to thank Superintendent Matsuda for dedicating this District In-Service Day to this important issue. Using our only day of the year that we all come together for this subject illustrates its importance. We must take what we learn here today and create interventions that, whether inside or outside of the classroom, will address student needs so that everyone can come to class ready to learn. ASTA will be here to support teachers in this endeavor and to work with the district to make sure our students receive the services that will enable them to succeed in our classrooms. It's my pleasure now to introduce our superintendent, Mike Matsuda.
Let's give it up for Grant Schuster, President of ASTA. You know, I'm really proud of the association we have with our associations, including the certificated, AFSCME, CSEA, the APGA, as well as the new mid-managers group. Because together, as Jaron said, I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of folks that we are responsible, the board is responsible for many, many lives and families and well-being. And as everybody knows, we're in a new age. As Collider, one of our consultants, our business consultant, has told us, you know, we no longer have a monopoly on our kids. And so it really challenges us to do the right thing, continue to do the right thing, build capacity among ourselves. And this is something, I was talking to Manuel Colon about this, you know, put something like this on, a one-day conference, really. This is a national level conference. And yes, we're indebted to our keynote speaker this morning, but the main show is about the teachers. And as you know, it's about teachers leading teachers forward. So that's our theme. We're not bringing in these outside folks like some of these private and charter schools have done. We are all about our family, protecting our family and moving forward. At that, I'd like to put a shout out to Dr. Jaron Freed. We're at Jaron and his team. If you guys on the Ed Division side, you know, you think about all the logistics and all the planning that was put into that. So Jaron and Manuel, let's acknowledge both of them and his team. as well as all of our folks on the logistics side. I was here Saturday, and you know, the place needed a little sprucing up, and it was like a full court press. So Jennifer and Root, the assistant soup of business who oversees and works with her team, led by Lance Bidneck. I know that he's at the district office, I think. So please, a shout out to all of our custodial staff and all of the service folks that help make this happen. As some of you know, I had an opportunity to go to India this summer and to visit with the Dalai Lama, and you know, it was like an hour and a half. Basically, there were 4 of us in the room, including Mayor Tom Tate, who made this visit happen. The Dalai Lama was very interested in hearing our story, because as you know, there are very few big city urban mayors who are actually working in collaboration with the public schools. Normally they're at odds and they're trying to take over each other and fighting and all that, but not in Anaheim. And in Anaheim, we are leading the country and perhaps the world in this thing called compassion and kindness, and really paying attention to the emotional well-being. One of the things we talked about is this convergence, this needed convergence between democracy and compassion and kindness. In fact, His Holiness, the Dalai Lama, says it's all about, he looked right at me and he said, you educators, it's really up to you to help save the world, because we're talking about the need to teach young people what he calls emotional hygiene. And we are so pleased today, this morning, to have an expert on emotional hygiene. I'm not sure, Lori, if you've been called an emotional hygienist, but that's what you are today for us. I have a brief introduction, and you know, like many of our speakers, just incredible, compassionate people that we brought forward. So, and I'm sorry, Lori, if I mess up your name here, but it's Lori DeSalto has been an assistant professor at Butler University since 2016, where she teaches both undergraduate and graduate programs in the College of Education. Lori was also an assistant professor at Marian University in Indianapolis for 8 years, where she founded the Educational Neuroscience Symposium. Dr. DeSato's passion is engaging her students through neuroscience as it applies to education by integrating mind-brain teaching, learning principles, and strategies into her coursework at Butler. The Applied Educational Neuroscience Certificate, created by Lori in 2016, is specifically designed to meet the needs of educators, counselors, and administrators who work beside children and adolescents who have and are experiencing adversity. She has created webinars for educators, clinicians, and administrators, illustrating how educators and students alike must understand their neuroanatomy to regulate behavior and calm the brain. She has authored a series of articles for Inside the School, an online publication providing strategies to administrators and educators alike. Lori's articles are published in Edutopia, Brain Bulletin, and Mind, Body, Spirit International magazine. She was published in the Brain Research Journal for her work in the 5th grade classrooms during a faculty in residence position with Washington Township Schools. Lori developed the social and emotional learning competencies for Indiana's Department of Education, which will be used by all educators throughout the state. Dr. DeSatos taught emotionally troubled students, worked as a school counselor in Indianapolis, was a private practice counselor, and was co-owner of the Indianapolis Counseling Center. Lori was also a behavioral consultant for Methodist Hospital in Indianapolis on the adolescent psychiatric unit, where she learned that emotional and mental illness can be so challenging for youth, but the brain has the ability to repair, and resilience through relationship is critical for emotional, social, and cognitive health. Lori resides in Indianapolis, Indiana, with her husband, Michael. She has 3 grown children, Andrew, Sarah, and Reagan. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Sidalis.
I think I'm good. Testing, testing. Can you hear me? Thank you so much. Thank you. So good morning, and I am over the moon excited to be here with all of you today. Boy, that light is bright. I normally don't like to be on a podium. I like to be right with you. But thank you, Mike, for that wonderful introduction. I want to thank Kelly Gallagher for bringing me here. Jaron has been working with me over the last couple of months, and what I want to emphasize, that was such a nice introduction, but I'm going to begin right now and tell you why I'm here today. 5 years ago, when I was teaching at Marian University and I was studying this research of educational neuroscience and how the brain is so intimately affected by adversity and trauma. And as I was studying this and teaching this to undergraduate and graduate students, I went to my car. I was at Arlington High School, which the state of Indiana had taken over that school, and I was evaluating and observing first and second year special education teachers in a middle school setting. And I thought to myself, Lori, you are not walking the walk. So I want to share with you today that a decision I made 5 years ago, and thankfully the deans of the university said yes, has changed everything for me. I asked to go back into the classroom, and that's exactly where I am 2 mornings a week. This semester, I'm with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. For the past 11 semesters, 10 semesters, I have been in a large district in Indianapolis, and I started with 5th grade. And I've been all the way through high school, and I literally am going in the mornings, I am planning, I am making huge mistakes and seeing great celebrations, but I am taking this research into our classrooms. And I want to share with you today, an hour, this is going to be an infomercial. Honest to God, I wish I had 3 days with you. You may not want that, but I'm so excited about this. And so what I want to share today, you will leave this auditorium with a couple of brain-aligned research-based strategies. And these are not out of a lab, and they're not out of a textbook. These are strategies that we are implementing in our classrooms. And I want you to think about a couple of terms today as we look at how our neurobiology is intimately affected and impacted by adversity. And so I want you to think about the power of being able to regulate our nervous system and the power of relationships. Because every day I sit beside, in our inner city schools in Indianapolis, I am sitting beside, just like you are, brilliant brains that are affected by adversity. And it changes not only how we think, but our very capacity to think. It changes the way we feel and the way we behave. And I want to say this to you today. You've not heard me before, but all chronic behavioral challenges are regulation challenges. These are physiological challenges. Our children and adolescents, your 7th through 12th graders who walk in rough, who walk in brilliant, but rough and dysregulated, they have a different neurobiology. It is not excusing behaviors, it's understanding behaviors. And I also want to share this question with you today. I want you to think about this with me today. The question is not what is wrong with this student, but what happened to the student. Because our biographies are and do become our biologies. And so this morning, this is my middle school class. And I just can't believe the connections I've made already with your school. So Jaron was so kind. And he sent to me, I really researched this district. And I was trying to think, okay, Lori, how does this work with the neurobiology of learning and behavior and our feelings. And so as I created this slide, I was thinking about, well, first of all, I hear that you all use the term mulligan, so please forgive me today and give me several of them if I'm not accurate with all of my information. But you have, this district is a miniature world. There is so much diversity in this district, and I'm amazed as I watched everybody come in this morning, and I think about the brain being a social organ. For me to talk about the brain today and our ability to think and to feel and to behave in a singular way is so inaccurate. We are wired for attachment. We are wired for attachment, and attachment drives all behavior and is the carrier of all development. So if you take one thing away today, I want you to think about, that is so much better. Now I can see you. That's perfect. That light is perfect. So as you think about attachment, I want you to think about these 5 C's that actually drive what all of you are doing every day in the classroom. So I was really thinking about, if we're not building connections and attachments with our students, then we're not communicating well, and we're not collaborating well, and we're not thinking creatively or critically thinking. And then I think about, what is character? I am so honored to be here this morning with a district that values these 5 drivers. So kudos to all of you. And in that light, I want to say this to you this morning. We are not here to talk about fixing a kid. What I am learning every day is that behavior, learning, discipline is about my brain state. If I don't walk into IPS School 60 regulated, if I don't walk into that classroom with my middle school students regulated myself, then I am not going to be very effective. So what we are talking about today is your brain health, your brain state. It is so, no one understands the work of this organic process called teaching and learning, because you sit beside these children day after day, hour after hour, and they spend 13,000 hours in our schools over K through 12. Now, right now, I'm reading my audience and I can see you. I'm not going to move, I can see you. So this is too much talking at you. We don't learn sitting on our behinds and being talked at. So what I want you to do is stand up. Go ahead and stand up. Now, here's what I want you to do. So I can talk to you about neuroplasticity, because it's the greatest gift for us as parents, for us as community members, and for us as educators. But I don't know if anyone on, what day of the week is this? Thank you. That was scary. So I'm going to ask you to make a peace sign and an okay sign. And what I want you to do right now, this is neuroplasticity. I want you as quickly as you can to switch and go back and forth, keeping all other fingers down. So go ahead, do it well. So come back to me for a minute. I heard laughing. And that's good, and if you're like most people, you really struggled with this. And there is a neurobiological reason you're struggling with this. You don't have any connections in your brain that know what the hell you were just doing. I mean, nothing was happening there. Nobody on a Monday morning had ever asked you to do this, so there were no circuits firing. You had no neurons connecting, wiring, and firing together. This is what we're talking, when we talk about social emotional learning, you have these brilliant brains of these students walking into this district. and they have the capacity to think, and they feel. But many of them, coming from significant adversity, don't have circuits, just like you did not have a circuit right here, for how to empathize, how to share, how to be kind, because their experiences have not included that. Go ahead and have a seat. You guys are good sports. So here is what I want to share, and I apologize, I'm going really fast this morning because I just want to get all of this to you. What I want you to think about today is we understand that neuroplasticity says to us every single experience structurally and functionally changes brain architecture. And I am so grateful to be educating in this time where we are finally recognizing mindfulness. Thank you. And I'm so excited that this district is beginning to incorporate or has been incorporating this discipline. What I'm talking with you about today is a framework. It is not a program. When I go into schools and I work with districts, whether it's for a week, whether it's for 6 months, I am adamant that it is not, I have to say to you, it's not a program, because programs are too scripted for this. Educational neuroscience, when we think about the regulating of the nervous system and building strong attachments, we're calling those touch points. Think about that, touch points. What we're doing is we are building on the routines and the procedures and the transitions that you already have in place. You've been in school a couple of months, and I'm sure you spent a few weeks teaching your procedures and routines. I would know this. I would have nothing to say to you this morning if I weren't back in the classroom. I know how we have to go over those, because the brain learns through patterned, repetitive activity. So anytime you want to change something, it is a process. That's why most of us here on October the 8th or 9th, whatever date it is, our New Year's resolutions are gone from January. And it's not because of willpower. It's because when you started those new behaviors, again, it felt very unsafe and unfamiliar to the brain, and so you gave up. And so sometimes our children and our adolescents go back to the same behaviors because they're habitual, because they feel safe, because that's all they know. So when we think about this today and looking at the language, I cannot emphasize, I'm going to give you a strategy right off the bat this morning, and I'm going to be talking about this more this afternoon. We are teaching students about their neuroanatomy. I am not going to call an area in the room a calm corner. I am going to call it an amygdala first aid station or an amygdala reset, because when you bring the science to this framework, it says to our kids, you're not a bad person. There's nothing wrong with you. Your brain has wired and therefore fired based on the one thing that develops brain architecture. Turn to the person next to you. You have 7 seconds. What is the main ingredient that builds healthy brain architecture or toxic brain architecture? 7 seconds. Okay, I'm going to bring you back. Now, if I had all day with you, we would have fun with this. But I'm just, give yourselves a nice pat on the back if you get this correct. So the term is, or the word I'm looking for is experience. Yeah. Experiences develop brain architecture. And those experiences include relationships, and they include environment. And if we had 2 weeks together, we'd start talking about epigenetics. because epi means above the gene, and the experiences and the relationships that we embrace and we implement into our lifestyle, our cultures, they all change our behaviors. That is changing the way the gene turns off or turns on. Your DNA is only a blueprint. So that is, I cannot wait to get out of bed in the morning, and you can ask my husband that. Literally, I pop up, and I'm just ready to talk about epigenetics. And my girls say you're the biggest buzz killer on vacation, because it's always about the brain. So as I look at your 5 drivers, and I think about, here's something else, and I know Kelly Gallagher is just a huge creator and proponent, and he came to Indianapolis actually and talked about the writing journey that you're on. And I was looking at that, and I wanted to share with you, yesterday in the hotel, I was looking at the research of Linda Chapman, and here's the coolest thing. Not only does writing develop the oral and the written skills that we need to live life, but it actually is healing to the brain and repairs brain architecture when there has been significant adversity and trauma. When you can name it, you can tame it. When it's shareable, it's bearable. That's Dan Siegel's research. And this writing is healing. So again, so many wonderful things happening here. I want you to look around the room at each other, and that can be awkward, so don't stare too long. And what I want you to do is just notice how we all gathered today and how we are all here and we look fairly normal. This is a great group. Actually, before I go into the invisibility of it, I won't make you stand up, but go ahead and put your pinky and your thumb up. I'm going to be easy on you. Go ahead and switch. So see if that's better. And this does not count. None of this. That's not it. You got it? So what we're talking about today is this invisibility. And when I was teaching children and adolescents in a self-contained, I hate the word disturbance, but our classification and ruling of that under IEP is ED, emotional disturbance. And I thought to myself, these kids look so wonderful and kind and loving and brilliant, and they are. But here is what we are beginning to understand. If a child doesn't know how to read, you teach them. And if a child doesn't know how to ride a bike, we teach them. And if a child doesn't know how to do an algebra problem, we don't hesitate to teach them. But if a child doesn't know how to behave, we typically punish. And I want to share this with you today. We're talking about how adversity changes brain architecture, but we also are talking about this. Traditional discipline works the best with the kids who need it the least. Traditional discipline works the best with the kids who need it the least. And I am probably just supporting and affirming and validating what all of you do so well. But I want to share with you today that that is how significant adversity affects brain architecture. And these children and adolescents don't care about rewards and consequences because they are in a survival brain state. And in a survival brain state, we cannot think ahead. And I'm going to share some examples with you in just a little bit. So let's have some fun right now. And I apologize if you already know this, but I want you to go ahead and put your hands on your forehead, right behind your eyebrows. What part of the brain is this? Just shout it out. Yep, this is the frontal lobe, and that frontal lobe, we're going to be, please understand today that the brain works in connections and holes, the holes. It's not working in separate regions. You guys, this is good. Everyone's still with me. So what happens here? Why? Let me ask you this first. When does this finish developing? Just shout it out. Yeah, so we've been told 25, 26, and you know, you could rent a car at 25, but what we now know, what we now know is this development is actually closer to 30, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, you guys, and 40 for men. So, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm sorry. Jaron, I'm sorry. So, when I was with my third graders last spring, I asked one of my little 8-year-olds, and I said, you know, now do you remember what happens here? And she says, Dr. Lori, this is where we do everything. And I thought that's a great analogy. So this area of the brain does not finish developing even when the environment and the relationships, when there's support and there's nurturing, until late 20s, early 30s. And this is where we pay attention, this is where we emotionally regulate, this is where we problem solve, where we have consequences, where we have working memory and sustained attention. All of that happens here. Now make 2 ovals, put them above your ears, and let's go ahead and wait. This reminds, I mean, all I've seen is Mickey Mouse over the last 36 hours. So this is deep inside each temporal lobe of this brain is the amygdala. And this part of the brain is your fight-flight response. And it's very different than the freeze response. In fact, if I were speaking to you 2 years ago, I would have put fight, flight, freeze together, and that is not very accurate today. And I'm going to share with you that when this area of the brain, when this amygdala is firing like fireworks, this frontal lobe begins to disconnect, and we see it go offline and shut down. So when I talk about adversity and when I talk about trauma, we see nothing happening here with regard to an oxygenated glucose blood flow. And when I talk about a survival brain, this is a brain that is wired to ask 3 questions. Am I safe? Is this safe? Is this classroom safe? Who can I trust is the second question. Who can I trust? And then when is this going to be over? We ask that, don't we? So when we think about the brain develops from the back, from the brain stem to the front, and from the inside out. And I want to share this with you today too. Many of our children and adolescents are coming in that fight, flight, or frozen, and I'm going to talk to you about that frozen brain state, and we're asking them to write a persuasive paragraph or to recite Shakespeare. And can I say they don't have the brain state for that task? But that's the beauty of neuroplasticity and the beauty of our bell work in middle school. When kids come in, boom, first thing we do is get that brain ready to go. We literally prime that brain for learning. We get that nervous system regulated. We get them calm and ready to go, and we use it through morning meetings, even if it's 2 minutes, even if it's 5 minutes. We use it through bell work, and we use it through transitions and procedures and routines. I want to share this with you. This little, and my girls, they always say to me, Mom, take that slide off, it's gross, but it's accurate. This sits next to the amygdala and the limbic system, and it is the hippocampi. And this hippocampus is the part of the brain that not only is responsible for our memory, our visual and emotional and spatial memory, and we see cell degeneration in Alzheimer's starting right here, but it also is the CEO of our stress response system or systems. So here is what I want to share with you today, and we aren't prepared to know this as educators, whether we're counselors, social workers, educators. What we have to understand is that in children as young as 5 and 6 years old, we are seeing damage in this area which compromises a child's ability to remember. If you have little to no memory, how well can you learn, even with the brilliance you bring in? I love what Bessel van der Kolk states. He says, not only does adversity change how we think, it changes our capacity to think. Adversity and trauma get under the skin. They change our DNA. They change cellular structure. And what looks disrespectful and oppositional and defiant, and those behaviors that look apathetic and unmotivated, these are pain-based behaviors. And these are adolescents who you sit beside who are coming in with significant ACEs. Please raise your hand if you are familiar with the Adverse Childhood Experience Study. I gotta see. So I see a few. I want to share this with you. And Sharon, will you tell me when I have 10 minutes, or will you watch my time? Because I'll just go on and on. I'm going to come back to this. I love this. And I kept this up here, even though we're talking about 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, and 12th graders. When big people are overwhelmed by big emotions, it is our job to share our calm and not to join their chaos. I cannot tell you how hard this is to do. And can I share and be transparent with you? My 3 children now are 27, 23, and 19. And Andrew Desitel, our oldest, and Kelly, I think, heard me talk about this in Indianapolis, triggers me like no other human being on the planet. And I can no more join his calmness. I mean, I wish I had known this as a mom. So we'll talk more about Andrew later because he owes this to me. So here is what we're looking at, and then I'm going to go into this ACE study. 27 to 33% of adolescents and children in our public schools are coming in with what I term our nation's, and what research terms is our nation's new learning disability, and that is anxiety. We are seeing our kids, and when I talk about coming in rough or coming in dysregulated, these are kids who are coming in with heightened levels of that neurohormone cortisol. And cortisol gets a bad rap because it's really a neurohormone that we need, and it helps us metabolize, and it helps us learn, and it helps with memory and sleep rhythms. But too much of it or too little of it damages brain tissue. So I'm not going to read all of these, but this statistic right here struck me that by 2030, the World Health Organization states that depression will be the #1 global health risk in our world. We know that in middle school right now, USA Today came out with this statistic a year ago. I don't think I put it up here, but it just is ingrained. And we know that the suicide rate in our nation has doubled between the ages of 10 and 14. And this is the second greatest time of brain development. That's why 6 years ago or 5 years ago, when I returned to the classroom, I chose 5th grade. I chose 5th grade because 9 or 10 years old is the time when the brain goes through its second greatest time of consolidation and proliferation of neural synapses. We have middle school students walking around with half their minds, and we're not prepared to understand that. So these statistics are sharing with us that we truly are in a mental health crisis with our adolescents and children, but within every crisis and within every gap, there is awareness. And I hope today that I can share this awareness and also ease your brain state in telling and sharing with you that the #1 builder is not only experiences, the #1 repair of pain-based behavior is connection, is relationships. It's not warm and fuzzy. It is how we are built. It is what our brains do innately. And do you know that our children's greatest natural innate resource is the ability to regulate? And yet, when we see children and adolescents coming in with high adversities, they're not able to do that. neurologically. So let's take a look at our studies. And I'm going to come back to this one too. This is so exciting. You're only the third audience I've talked to that has this newest research. So stay with me just for a minute. But before I do that, please stand one more time. This is too much sitting. Now, what I want you to do, and you're going to do this really quick, is find the person, find a partner sitting next to you or behind you or in front of you really quick. Find them with your eyes really quick. All right. One of you is going to talk. The other one is going to listen and probably laugh. And so here's what you're going to do, and then we're going to switch. So I want you to share your biggest takeaway. Whoever's going to talk, share your biggest takeaway in this first whatever, how long I've been talking, 20, 30 minutes. And you talk with the tongue on the roof of your mouth, just like this. So you don't move your tongue, you talk like this. Your biggest takeaway. You have 7 seconds. Go. Okay, I'm going to put you out of your misery. Come back. That was great. Come back to me. Okay, now you're going to switch. And what you're going to do this time is, if you were the one who was just standing and kind of smiling and laughing at that, what you're going to do is you are going to share your biggest takeaway. But on every third word, you say pop. Now, you don't have to keep your tongue on the roof of your mouth. So just like my biggest pop takeaway is pop. Okay, you got to go fast. You have 10 seconds. Go. Yeah, and there's. Google it, but yeah, I thought. Yeah, okay, this is weird. That's good. Last night. That's awesome. Yeah. Okay, go ahead and have a seat. How much time? About 30 minutes. 30? Okay. Can you tell me when I'm at 10 minutes? Okay. Okay, so I've got 30 minutes. Okay. I'm getting hot. Okay, so I'm going to go through this right now because I want to make sure that we cover a lot of this. So what you just did, what these little fun things we're doing, these are called brain intervals. And I'm not calling them brain breaks because, like the word rigor, brain breaks has just become overused. I want to share with you this morning that when you infuse brain intervals, you're waking up the brain stem and you're alerting the student to novelty. And our brains love novelty. We love to be curious. We are naturally curious. We love to anticipate. You all know that when you anticipate a fun weekend, most of the time it's much more exciting to anticipate it than when you're in the middle of it, right? And that's that dopamine. You know, that's that dopamine that builds and squirts through our brains. So what I want to share with you is taking a look at this new ACE study. These brain intervals, what we just did is discipline. See, we come at discipline on the back end. We're traditionally reactive. But discipline, when you come at discipline on the front end and you build it into your procedures and routines, and if I'm an administrator, I don't begin a staff meeting without a brain interval or without these same, everything I'm sharing today is not just about kids in our classrooms, it's about us leading adults. So let me share this new study and the original about in the late 1990s. And please forgive me if you've heard this, but this is too important not to talk about this morning. In the late 1990s, Vince Felitti and Robert Onda from the CDCs and Kaiser Permanente came together and they found a research study that was startling. And until this study, the original was the largest public health study of its kind. It started out as an obesity study, but here is what they discovered. And forgive me for going through this so quickly. What they discovered, and again, I want to share this with you. When I say ACE, or ACEs, that represents adverse childhood experiences. So the ACE study in the 1990s was the original adverse childhood experience study. We must understand this as educators. We know that they identified at the time 10 indicators. And so when they surveyed 17,500 adults, and it was a very homogenized original group, I believe 70% had a college education, or 70% were white, 40% had a college education. It was not a diverse group. They found something remarkable, and I want to share this with you. There's not a person in this auditorium that has not brought in our own ACEs. We come in with our own adversities. And so these are common. And the awareness of these ACEs are critical for us to know, because some of our own ACEs can trigger us when we see some behavior in a child or adolescent. Let me share with you some of these ACEs. If you grew up in an environment where there was significant poverty, give yourself one ACE. If you grew up in an environment where you were feeling socially rejected or humiliated much of the time, that's an ACE. If you grew up in an environment or with a caregiver that was struggling with mental illness, depression, anxiety, that's an ACE. If you grew up in an environment where there was addiction or alcoholism, that's another ACE. If you grew up in an environment where there was significant neglect, and I want to speak to neglect because neglect means that the brain is not getting the directions and the instructions it needs to develop. And neglect happens across all socioeconomic, racial, and ethnicities. Actually, all of these adversities do. This is about all of us. If you grew up in an environment where there was domestic violence, where a parent or caregiver died, where there were early accidents or illnesses that were chronic, where there was sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse. These are all ACEs, and I want to share with you today that Dr. Carrian's research tells us that a child or an adolescent that walks into our district and our schools with 4 or more adversities is 32.5 times more likely to have academic and behavioral challenges. The correlation, the dose-response relationship between the number of adversities in your life and the connection or the correlation to ischemic heart disease, lung cancer, immune disorders, asthma, addiction, mental illness is extremely high. And a child or adolescent that has a number 6 or higher has a projected 20 years shorter lifespan. We need to understand this. And my husband, Michael, took this survey, not this summer, but we were sitting on our patio last summer. And his ACE score is a 7. And he said, my God, Lori, any more good news on a Saturday morning? And I said, but honey, it's the resiliency of the brain. It's the repair that can happen. So all of these brain-aligned strategies that I'm going to be talking about with administrators this afternoon and sharing some in here right now, this is where we calm the nervous system. This is where regulation comes in, because when you regulate a survival brain, you create a portal to this prefrontal cortex. So these are, and I actually will send this PowerPoint to anybody who wants it. Maybe we'll set it up somehow so you can have this. These are the ACEs and the dose-response relationship with behavior, physical, mental health. And I want to go back to this new one that was created through 23 states, 249,000 adults, and looking at using this behavioral risk factor surveillance survey. And the data was compiled, it was finished in 2014, and I believe the data was compiled in 2017. And a couple more adversities have been added to this, and you know this, you're not going to be surprised. Technology, social media, and also looking at multiracial populations and LGBTQ populations. These are significant adversities of our youth today. So I'm over the moon excited to share with you too that the medical world is finally tapping into this. I'm working with Dr. Jim Bean in Northern Indiana, who's a pediatrician. And really, as an educator, we're looking at these models. This is looking at a child's ecology coupled with their biology, and therefore we see emotional, social, and cognitive development. This is really, really exciting, and I want to share, we'll do a couple, I want to give you an example. We use this as bell work. The language of the brainstem is not words. And most of us, when we are trying to reason with an adolescent, when we are trying to redirect an adolescent, when we're trying to help them, and they are in a survival brain state, we use words. And nobody in the history of being told to calm down has ever calmed down. Nobody. And so what we know is that when you are dysregulated and rough, and isn't this true about our own families? I mean, when I think about the air and the energy and the words I've spent on Andrew Desatel, I just think, oh my God, what was I thinking? He didn't hear a damn thing I said because he was in the brainstem. So right now, take your hands and rub them together as fast as you can. Make your arms hurt. Literally make them ache. Now let them go. Take a deep breath in. If your hands feel tingly, that's a sensation. And so we are creating, as part of our bell work, for regulation, routine, we have sensation word walls. We have sensation jars. And when kids come in, they pick a sensation because when you can name it, you can tame it. And to say I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling sad or whatever that feeling, sometimes they can't do it. They need a sensation. How does this sound? I'm prickly. I'm feeling prickly. I'm edgy. I'm tired. I'm tense. I'm full. I'm teary. Sensations, when we use them and we have kids draw it, they take the word and they draw it. It's bell work. I don't care if you teach 12th grade, 5th grade, kindergarten. When they come in and they can draw the sensation and give it a shape and a size and a color and tell me where it would land on their body, that is healing to brain architecture. The language of the limbic system is feelings. We need feelings working with cognition. And Jill Bolte-Taylor's research says to us, we are wired to feel before we think. We are feeling creatures who think. We're not thinking creatures who feel. A child or an adolescent needs to feel safe and they need to feel felt before they ask, what can I learn? No matter how brilliant they are. Oftentimes, the symptoms of high adversity and trauma look like ADD and ADHD. We see children inattentive, impulsive, hyperactive, and unable to focus. And where do we put them in the class? Because we're thinking we're doing the right thing. Where do we move them? Close to us, in the front. And for a kid who comes in with 4 or more adversities, that's about the worst thing we can do. They need to be in the back so they can see everything around them so that they can feel safe. Because the question of the brainstem is, am I safe? The question of the limbic system, which is the language of feelings, is, am I felt? And then finally, the language of the cortex is words. What can I learn? This, to me, right here, and this could be part 2 for us, is the best visual image of discipline. And this is brain aligned, and this is regulating the nervous system. I don't care if this is a 5-year-old or a 12-year-old. This police officer from Indianapolis, who is a friend of mine, Precious Jones, shares this story. This actually made national news a couple years ago. This is co-regulation. Our adolescents who have come from significant adversity, and I didn't mention, think of our refugees. Think of the loss of family for periods of time, and think of language gaps. Those are all adversities. And these children and adolescents have not grown up with consistent, emotionally available caregivers. And when that doesn't happen, not only is the brain wired in survival, but the brain literally is in this fight-flight where all it can do is conserve energy just to stay alive. And I'm not exaggerating. This little one threw himself between the hallway and the classroom door. He had been ripping everything off bulletin boards. He'd been shouting at classmates. He'd been physically abusive. And when Precious came in and moved him over, scooted him with her nonverbal, he threw himself on the floor, and she didn't look at him. She didn't talk to him. She just waited. This is what we call joining up. We join up. And what does that look like with an 18-year-old? We give them space to regulate. We give them an opportunity to pace, if that's what they need. We give them the opportunity to take a little walk and get some air and get a sip of water. So as we look at these strategies today, Abraham Maslow, his theory has kind of been turned upside down with the research of Matt Lieberman. And what we know is that our basic developmental needs are attachment and regulation. And this is how we change brain architecture with our students. We can do it through bell work, procedures, and routines. And then comes affiliation and finally learning. So these are my middle school. These are 8th grade. These are some strategies we're using. I'm not going to go into this right now because I have so much to share with you in the short time, but I want you to think about your brain state, and I want you to think about being a thermostat and not a thermometer, because emotions are contagious. Emotional contagion actually is the reason why the number one reason, think about this, the number one reason for increased school violence in our secondary schools today across our nation is staff counter-aggression. Staff counter-aggression. And we understand, and our intent and our heart and mind are with these children and adolescents, but we are human too, and we get triggered. So thinking about adversity, many times, whether you teach 7th grade or sophomores or juniors, you see an emotional age that's about half that chronological age when a child becomes dysregulated. It has nothing to do with their beautiful cognition and their ability to learn once we've created that portal. So this is, over here is a sensation word wall that we're using. This is, we are using a Tibetan bowl. We call it a singing bowl in middle school. And we are using sound, rhythm to regulate that nervous system. So let's do this right now. We know that we sleep in rhythms, we eat in rhythms, our heart beats in rhythms, We live in rhythms. Everything is rhythm. So this is going to sound so cool in here. So what we're going to do, you're going to pretend we're finishing up our lesson. Everyone's getting a little rough, a little dysregulated, bored. We're losing our attention. So we're going to do some rhythm, and it's very simple. You're going to go slap, clap, slap. Do that with me. Keep going. Good. One more time. 3, 2, 1. Now, here's the next one, and then you can belt out the song you hear because you're going to hear a song. So we're going to go slap, slap, clap, slap, slap, clap. That's awesome. Good. Awesome. Okay. Now, part 3. 1, 2, 3, clap. 1, 2, 3, clap. Slap, cross, slap. So it's just, we're adding. So let's do just part 3. 1, 2, 3, clap. 1, 2, 3, clap. Slap, cross, slap. Do it again. 1, 2, 3, clap. 1, 2, 3, slap, cross, slap. You guys are awesome. Now, I don't have enough time for us to put it all together, but you get the picture. We are using rhythm. We are using music. We are using art in creating the sensation word wall. All of those, art, breath, movement, rhythm, sensations. That is how we begin. And as Mike mentioned, I write for EdUtopia. So I have so many articles with strategies that you can use for brain-aligned bell work. And you can begin the day and procedures. And again, if you look at these strategies, these are good for all students. We're not talking about our kids who come in with just 4 or more adversities. These strategies are good for all students. So thinking about how we use breath, because in Indiana, if you use the word meditation in a classroom, people still look at you like you've got 10 sets of eyes. And I'm just over it. So meditation is actually an executive function workout. When you focus on a stimulus, when you focus on your breath, a taste, a sound, like we do with the Tibetan bowl, when you focus on a stimulus, you strengthen that attention area in those executive functions. You wouldn't think about starting the day without brushing your teeth, I hope. And I'm hoping that after I leave here that you all will begin to think about how you begin a day, either school-wide, class-wide, with a focused attention practice. That's what we're calling these, focused attention practices. And again, I will send you, the Department of Education in Indiana had asked myself and my colleague, we've been writing these competencies. We can't call them standards because that freaks us all out. So we're calling these competencies, but they are designed to meet the kid in brain development. And I want to share this with you today. Think about this. Our achievement gaps are adversity gaps. Our achievement gaps are adversity gaps. This is not because a child or adolescent is not smart enough. These adversities literally affect brain development and affect behavior and all of that. So how much time do I have left, Jaren? Am I okay? 15, excellent. Okay, whew. All right, so I'm going to throw some strategies to you. You can have this. I feel like I've left out some things, but I want you to look at this dual brain sheet. We know the importance of leveling the playing field when there is a child or adolescent that's coming in and is just coming from a conflict, coming from, that brain state where there's that negative bias. By the way, we all have a negative brain bias, all of us, and that's because of our survival instinct. So this sheet is actually designed for you to model the behaviors you want to see from your students, even if you think you handled a conflict perfectly. You still want to be able to model those behaviors, because here is the truth. Our children and adolescents who are coming in with these adversities and trauma don't have the experiences that build empathy. They don't have the experiences, as I said before, that can really create a pause. How many of you have kids that are reactors? They come in and they don't even know what a pause is. They just come in. And so that's about a third of my students. And can I share this with you too? There's not a lot of difference in development between 4-year-olds and 7th graders. Because I'm working with 3- and 4-year-olds at St. Mary's Early Childhood Center, and the similarities are incredible when they're dysregulated, when they're coming in rough. So this dual brain sheet is when everybody's regulated. And can I share this? I don't know why we feel we've got to discipline kids when the moment something happens. Because a brain stem cannot regulate another brain stem. A dysregulated adult cannot regulate a child. We've got to be, the very first step, I've got to be calm. And I've got to wait for that student to be calm before we can begin to work out discipline. And I was sharing this before I'm learning, and our new book is about discipline and brain architecture. And I was thinking, most of us have been brought up to think of discipline as something we do to kids. And really, discipline is something that we want to create within them. You know, we want to give them those tools now when the brain has the most plasticity. We want to teach them how to breathe deeply. We want to give them focused attention practices. Most of us, when we breathe, our shoulders go up and we take in shallow air. And we know that when you do, our grandparents were right. When you take those 3 deep breaths, it literally engages the parasympathetic nervous system. Your heart rate lowers, your respiration lowers, your blood pressure lowers, and you begin to get that oxygenated glucose blood flow back up here. We are teaching our students this science. We're not telling them to take 3 deep breaths and be done with it. We're saying, this is what happens in your brain. Isn't this the coolest? When you breathe, you're actually activating that medial prefrontal cortex. My 5th graders can tell you about the HPA axis. They think it's the coolest thing ever, that they know about their stress response systems. Because when you've got buy-in, then there's change that happens. But it takes a long time. It doesn't happen overnight. So these sheets say, what is our challenge? I fill these out, we fill these out apart, and then we come back and discuss them. How did we handle it? What led up to it? What are 2 adjustments we can make the next time? And how will we do this? This one is a guest order check, and you can order these online, and this is a touch point. We should be doing this for each other in our schools. This is a staff strategy. How cool would it be if your principal in your building came up to you with a guest check and said, I want to work for you today. What do you need from me? How cool would that be? What do you need from me? Our brains, I watched these beautiful dancers on stage before I started to talk, and I looked at their collaboration and how they were using their bodies and their minds, and it was a social presentation. So this is from one of my 8th grade students, and she said to me, know and tell me when you see me trying, notice when I'm frustrated, give me a break. Let me go to the bathroom one more time. You know what she needed? She needed some air and movement and water. She didn't probably need to use the restroom, but she needed to move. And I said to her, I can make that extra bathroom break happen. Research shares 2 ways we regulate the nervous system. There are many ways, but we know breath and movement are critical to cognition. Breathing and movement are critical to cognition. This is my new, I love this strategy. It's called let's have a cup of coffee. Many of our children and adolescents who come in do not have an object that they feel really is theirs. I literally went through my kitchen cabinet and went to the dollar store and got all of my middle school students' mugs. And they've painted them, they've personalized them, and this is theirs. And they keep it, and most days we drink water out of it because the truth is, most of our kids are dehydrated. Most of us are. 10? Okay. Okay, I need to take a deep breath. Focused attention. We know that our children and adolescents need to be drinking water every 2 hours. And I want to share this with you too. Not only do we use these in morning meetings and when we are doing our bell work, but this can be a ritual. However it looks in your classroom, the brain craves routine and rituals and structure. I'm using this response as active constructive responding by Shelley Gable to really tap into having a child or adolescent feel felt and building that touch point and that connection with us as the educators. And what this says is when a student shares an experience with you, whether it's awful or whether it's a celebration, we ask for details. Tell me where you were when you heard that. What were you wearing? Or who was with you? How were you feeling? Really? So then what did you do right after you heard that news? What happened right before you heard that news? Active constructive responses tell us, I see you, I hear you, I feel you. And this is another touch point that helps build attachment and relationship, and it regulates the nervous system. Validation and the power of questions, so critical. I believe Kelly heard this story when I was speaking in Indianapolis, but 12 years ago, our oldest son was going through a really challenging time. Andrew came out of the womb with anxiety. I mean, you should see his shoes. I said, no one walks the earth harder than this young man. I mean, literally, he wears his shoes out. He was a freshman at Lawrence Central High School. And you know this, when somebody in your family is struggling emotionally, it affects the family system, does it not? You all feel it. And at that time, Andrew was making horrible choices. And he had quit sports, he was sneaking out of the house at night. I mean, I was grounding him. I thought I was the most vigilant mother in the world. And one Monday afternoon, I get an email from his teacher, and in the subject line it said, Andrew in action. And I thought, oh my God, do I open this now, or do I wait? And believe me, we all have triggers, and mine is 317-964-7400. That is the dean's office. And I opened the email immediately, and these are the words I read. Dear Dr. Desatel, I want you to know that Andrew finished his project today. He had a smile on his face, and he was helping others. And then he wrote to me, please let me know how I may serve you in the days and weeks to come. And I can't tell you what that meant to me as a mom and as an educator. This teacher saw the light in Andrew that we couldn't see. Our family couldn't see it. We had lost hope. And so as I shared this with Andrew, he worked his ass off for Brandon Pickett and got an A in Spanish. He got D's and F's and everything else, but an A. And it's so true, isn't it? We work for people we like. And so as we think about the power of connection and attachment, it not only feels good, but we are repairing damaged tissue and building resiliency when we ask these questions right up here, because right after Mr. Pickett had asked or had sent that email, my graduate students and I said, let's develop these questions and let's see what happens. I am so excited for all of you to implement these. Even if the student doesn't hear you, even if they don't, meaning they don't put their head up, they don't respond, keep asking the questions. What do you need? How can I help? And what can we do to make this better? When you ask those and you're asking them from your cortex and not from your brainstem or your amygdala, and there's transparency and you are emotionally available, it can change and repair and move what we call upshifting, move that student from survival brain to cortical thinking. And it's a process. It takes time. It takes time. I'm going to share this with administrators this afternoon, but I could just jump up and down and I'm so excited about this. And this is an awful, like I had the finished version, but this is, you know how we have 504s, right? And we've got IEPs. Why not as a district? Let me ask you this. Why not as a district create a form? I have one. And you'd never have to know what the ACEs of your kids are, but we all have a pretty good idea of the number of ACEs, right? You have a good idea of the number of adverse childhood experiences your students are walking in with. Why can't we give them school accommodations, just like we would give a child for reading or for math or for attention deficit? These are accommodations that we can give to our students who come in dysregulated and rough, and they need deeper relationships and more touch points. In Indiana, we're training bus drivers in this. I've been speaking to districts in Texas and in Indiana, and the bus drivers are our first and last responders. They see patterns we don't see sometimes. They need this. Not this form, but they need this understanding. Actually, they could use this form. It's about all of us. Those touch points come from office staff. They come from paraprofessionals. They come from cafeteria. They come from our drivers, transportation, everybody. So I'll talk more about that. Do I have 1 minute left? How many? 2? Okay. This is the research from today. And I love to stay connected with all of you. I share everything. We're reading a book in my undergraduate class right now called Show Your Work. And honestly, if you don't share, who's going to learn? I want you to have all of these strategies. So please connect with me on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, Facebook. My author page is How May I Serve You? So you'll have that information. This is the book. This is How May I Serve You we dedicated that to Mr. Brandon Pickett. And Michael McKnight and I published Unwritten. These are available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon, and I love Unwritten. It's a lot about what we talked about today, but here's the exciting thing. I just got an email from our publisher, and this will be available in November online, and it has a birth date of January 2019. And so Michael McKnight is my good friend and colleague who works in New Jersey, and we are so excited to share this specific text for all of you, whether you're a parent, an educator, anybody, clinician, pediatrician, anyone who sits beside pain-based behaviors. We are just over the moon excited. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. I made it, I think. I'm okay. And I'll see some of you this afternoon, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you again, Lori. I really appreciate you being here, sharing your wisdom with all of us. I will actually share some closing thoughts at the end of the day with regards to the things that she had talked about this morning, and we'll connect it to the work you're doing in the first and second breakout session. What I want to do now is I want to walk you through the logistics of the rest of the day. So you were all given folders when you registered this morning, so this would be the time to pull them out so I can kind of explain a few things in those folders as we transition to our first breakout session. So I'll give you a quick second to go ahead and get those out. So in your folders, you'll obviously see the agenda, and there's a couple of documents in particular I want you to pay attention to. The first document that I want you to pay attention to in your folder is for the first breakout session. Now, your principal is supposed to talk to you about where your schools will be, specifically your own room assignment. But if not, in your folder, you're going to see a handout that has it broken down by site. So you can see where all the schools will be. I think with the exception of Walker, all the schools are in the two-story building to my right, your left. So when we leave the auditorium, you will be making your way over to that building. I think Walker Junior High is in the College and Career Center. So that's the first thing. Also in your folder is a map of Anaheim High School. I know this is our 5th year here, but I certainly don't expect you to have the campus memorized. So you do have a map so you can see where you will be headed during the sessions. You should also have some handouts that you'll be using for your first breakout session with your sites. It's called the Breakout Session 1 Keynote Debrief. The nice thing that we're trying to do today is rather than take the PLC time that you have on your Tuesdays, we scheduled this first breakout session so you're with your schools, so that we could protect the PLC time that you have at your sites. We gave you the time this morning to debrief as a staff based on what you heard this morning. That will be our first session this morning. From there, you will go to lunch, and you also have, I think, a map in your folder with some of the food trucks. We're going to have a bunch of food trucks here, and there's also some local restaurants. You have an hour of time scheduled for lunch, so it's plenty of time for you to get that food and come on back for the second session, which will be in the afternoon. The second session will begin at 12:35. So 12:35 is when the second session will begin. In that second session, you have another handout in your folder. In that handout, you'll see the 50 sessions that we are offering this afternoon. Again, big kudos and shout out to the many teachers, the 50 teachers plus, who are leading those presentations. What we asked you to do, which is what we've done in the past, go ahead and select the 3, maybe 4 that really spark your interest, so that way when you go to a room, if it's full, you can go to your second choice, then third choice, and so on. But they are done not just by content, but a lot of these will also meet the needs of you regardless of what you teach. I do want to say specifically for our PE teachers, just as a reminder, you will be in rooms 106 if you're in the junior high, rooms 122 if you're in 106 and 122. Are connected to the work that we've done around the 5 Cs. After our second breakout session, which should end around 1:35, we will make it back here to the auditorium where we will do our closing. Our close will only take about 15-20 minutes. From there, we'll check out, and then we'll go back to the buses, or you go back to your campuses. We should be done in here by 2 o'clock, giving you plenty of time to get back to your sites, especially for those who maybe coach a sport and have to get back to your athletes at the 2:30 time period. With that, that is our day. That's some of the content in your folder. I am very much looking forward to walking around during this first breakout to see the great discussions taking place around the work that we just spoke of. And then again, the second session, we focus on the 5 Cs. With that, go ahead and gather your belongings. Go ahead and make your way to your first session. I do hope you have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you throughout the day. Thank you again for your attention this morning.